After a bit of a lull in the Unearthed Arcana department, we just received a brand new installment yesterday for the Apocalyptic subclasses. This includes 4 new subclasses: the Circle of Preservation Druid, the Gladiator Fighter, Defiled Sorcery Sorcerer, and the Sorcerer King Warlock. There are some pretty interesting ideas in this UA, but the subclass that I wanted to talk about the most is the Defiled Sorcery Sorcerer, because it, to me, exemplifies exactly what Unearthed Arcana is all about. Taking interesting ideas that might seem a bit wild at first, building something around it, and seeing how it all works out. So with that, let's take a look at the Defiled Sorcery Sorcerer. We're going to begin with the description so everyone knows what they can expect from this subclass. Your innate power siphons life essence from the surrounding world. At your command, creatures grow sick and plants wither to husks. You draw power from the corruption of life itself, draining vitality to fuel destructive magic. This to me just sounds so cool. I'll be honest, the Sorcerer has always been among the classes that has appealed to me the least. Conceptually, I think it's awesome, but it's just never called to me in a very strong way. But this is a completely different story. I love the flavor of this corrupted and defiled form or shell of a person oozing with necrotic magics, using it to fuel their own powers and turn it against others. I'm so in. Hey, and really quick, I am rapidly approaching 20,000 subscribers and have some very exciting things planned for that milestone. So if you'd like to help me out on that journey, I would really appreciate it. It's completely free and you'd be surprised just how much subscribing to the channel and clicking the like button while you're there helps spread the word. Thank you so much. First up at level 3, we get what is probably our signature feature, Defile and Empower. It's giving blood magic. The way it works is that once per turn when we roll our damage for a spell that we cast using a spell slot, we can opt to empower the spell by utilizing some of our own energy. To do so, we roll any number of unexpended hit dice up to half the level of the spell slot expended, to a minimum of 1, and we round up. We then add the value rolled on the dice to the damage roll for the spell. Once we do this, the hit dice are considered expended and are no longer available for healing or anything else. Before we move on, I'll just note a few of the limitations in case you didn't catch them. It does not work with cantrips, and it doesn't work with any kind of free spellcasting either. A spell slot must be expended. Now, the cool thing here is that it doesn't actually stop there, because we aren't just limited in consuming our own life energy for this. Instead of utilizing our own hit dice, we can use the Lifesteal sub-feature and instead opt to target any creature within 30 feet of ourselves and subject them to a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, we use their hit dice instead of our own. Creatures that are immune to the exhaustion condition automatically succeed on the save, and we will get back to that soon. It's also worth noting that when we use the Lifesteal option to target another creature, we round down for the spell slot instead of rounding up, but it is still set to a minimum of 1. Once a creature fails against Lifesteal, we can't use it again until we complete a long rest or we spend 3 sorcery points to bring it back online, requiring no action. Another important qualifier: using Lifesteal does not lock us out of using the Defile and Empower feature on ourselves. So even if a creature fails and we consume their hit dice, we can still continue to use our own hit dice without needing to spend any sorcery points or waiting until after we've completed a long rest. That cost is only required if we wish to use Lifesteal again. Now, there is a lot to talk about in this feature. I said before how it's giving blood magic, which is sort of true. Now, you aren't actively sacrificing any immediate hit points, but you are sacrificing potential healing in the future. These are the kinds of interesting game within a game type features that I very much enjoy. It makes you think about whether or not you want to use it now to get a buff, or consider your condition, how likely you are to need health soon, and decide to hold your hit dice or not. It's also just an extra use for hit dice in general, which is always cool to see. Then there's the Lifesteal component to this. Being able to target other creatures with this is very flavorful and a fascinating concept. Monsters have famously had almost zero reason to include hit dice in their stat block, but this does actually provide some reason for it, so that's admittedly pretty sweet. It's worth noting that I don't believe that there are any monsters currently that take advantage of having hit dice, so this doesn't really impact them, though I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. But it also could if your DM used it to heal or something of that nature. It is also worth pointing out that just like during our Warcaster discussion, the word creature and not enemy is used in this feature. So with that, I believe that you can absolutely target an ally with this ability, and more to the point, creatures in 2024 can choose to fail a saving throw. This creates a very cool potential team dynamic here, where you can literally sacrifice some part of your ally to empower your spell and harm an enemy. They even double down on this in the design note where they say creatures, both characters and enemies. It's almost as if to underscore that no, the use of the word creature was not a mistake. So with all this talk about how cool the feature is, the question that needs to be asked, how good is it? For low level spells, it feels especially impactful. It's essentially almost free upcasting, or like opportunity cost upcasting. It's like taking out a loan on your damage potential, except you might not need to pay it back if you don't take damage or if an ally heals you or you finish a long rest instead. Which is an important note. There's a lot of ways here that Daddy Watsy just essentially writes off this loan and you never have to deal with the consequences of it. Of course, that is best case scenario though. A few points to note about the hit dice damage scaling though. As of right now, it just reads, roll a number of unexpended hit dice. It is not specific to your sorcerer hit dice. So if you multi-class, you can gain the benefit of larger hit dice to boost your spell damage depending on which class you dip into, and not just the d6 from sorcerers. This is also said why it's almost like free upcasting, since obviously a lot of spells are not dealing just d6s. So is it good? Yeah, probably. It's especially good since it isn't exclusively tied to attack roll spells and will apply to anything in area of effects too. So if you took Burning Hands, it basically is casting it at second level. Thunderwave, though it technically isn't exactly the same as an upcast since it's a d6 instead of a d8, it still does hit every target. For a spell like Fireball, it's actually kind of crazy since it's like casting it at 5th level since you can dump 2 extra d6s into it, provided that you're targeting yourself with Defile and Empower, or 4th level if you use Lifesteal. And to add to that, Defiled Sorcery Sorcerers also gain some extra spells that work with this feature, like Inflict Wounds, Ray of Enfeeblement and Sickness, and of course, Blight. So yeah, I think this is a good feature. I'm not sure if it's broken, I don't think that it is. The way the feature is designed prevents you from ever using more than 5 hit dice, and even that is for 9th level spells, and being forced to round down when using Lifesteal certainly helps to keep things a bit more reined in. One final thing I wanted to mention about the feature is that for the Lifesteal component, creatures that are immune to exhaustion will automatically succeed on their saving throw. Now, you might not expect it to be the case, but surprisingly, exhaustion is actually one of the most common immunities in the entire game across all tiers of play, so that as well also does help to keep this at least somewhat balanced. Okay, we spent a lot of time on that feature, but I think it needed it. It was a big one. Let's move on to our next 3rd level feature, which are our Defiled Sorcery Sorcerer spells. Like I touched on earlier, at level 3, we get Blindness Deafness, Inflict Wounds, Ray of Enfeeblement, and Ray of Sickness. At level 5, we get Bestow Curse and Vampiric Touch. At level 7, we get Blight and Hallucinatory Terrain. And at level 9, we get Anti-Life Shell and Contagion. Most of these spells are pretty good to begin with, though Vampiric Touch and Blight are certainly a bit more questionable. They'll certainly get better with Defile and Empower. Especially Vampiric Touch, since it can provide a bit more healing, which could be extremely valuable if we're always tapped out on hit dice. I think the big thing about this feature is that what a lot of this subclass offers pushes the sorcerer toward a much more melee style character, or at least not at crazy distances. And a number of the spells provided here are actually touch, like Vampiric Touch, Bestow Curse, Contagion, and Inflict Wounds. This gives the sorcerer more options for things to do when in close range, which helps round out the playstyle quite a bit. Whether or not it's enough, I'm not sure. Let me know your thoughts. Next at level 6, we get Corrupted Caster. This gives us 2 sub-features. First up is Defiler's Ward. What this does is when you take the bonus action to transform sorcery points into a spell slot, you gain a protective ward. You roll the number of d6s equal to the spell slot level gained, and you gain that many temporary hit points. Additionally, it kinda works like Armor of Agathis. When a creature hits us with a melee attack roll while we have temporary hit points, they take necrotic or poison damage equal to our charisma modifier. So admittedly it's not a ton, but it's more than literally nothing. What's interesting here is that again, the wording does not specify these temporary hit points. It just says if a creature hits you with a melee attack while you have temporary hit points, they take some damage. I think this is actually the intention too. I don't think they required it to be the temps from Corrupted Caster, though this just provides you with one way to obtain temporary hit points. Though I am sure many people will debate that. Our second subfeature, Strength and Rot, makes it so that the damage dealt by either our sorcerer spells or our sorcerer features ignore resistance to poison and necrotic damage, which sounds great. The problem is that poison damage, despite being by far the most immune to damage type in the game, isn't actually resisted by all that many creatures in the 2024 Monster Manual. Necrotic, though, is pretty good. It's a nice buff and can also help to expand our spell choices and make some of the spells that we already have just that much better. So while not necessarily as powerful as it might seem on the face of it, I think this is a great feature overall. Next up at level 14, we also get Withering Aura, which makes it so that whenever we activate our innate sorcery, an aura of defiling magic also extends from us in a 15-foot emanation for the duration of innate sorcery, which, as a reminder, lasts for a maximum of 1 minute. The aura has 2 perks. First, when an enemy within the aura hits us with an attack roll, we can reduce the damage by an amount equal to our charisma modifier. So again, it's not a lot. By this point, it's almost certainly going to be 5. Importantly though, this is repeatable, so it's not like we can only use this once, though it is limited to enemies within that 15-foot emanation, though they could be melee or ranged attacks. I don't think this is anything to write home about, but it's a nice boon to help offset the fact that we are likely burning through hit dice at an aggressive rate. It combines nicely with and doesn't have anti-synergy with Defiler's Ward, which is also a nice bonus. The second sub-feature it gives us is Essence Siphon. This makes it so that when an enemy dies within the aura, we regain 1d4 sorcery points. Once we gain sorcery points in this way, we can't do so again until we use innate sorcery again. 1d4 sorcery points at level 14 isn't a ton, but it is more than nothing and has a 50% chance to allow us to fully recover from spending 3 to reactivate Defile and Empower. At a base level now, we can only use innate sorcery twice. However, by this point we have also unlocked Sorcery Incarnate, which does allow us to activate it again by spending 2 sorcery points. So if we had to do that and then activate Essence Siphon, it's really only regenerating what functionally amounts to either 1 or 2 sorcery points. Again, it's not a whole ton at this point in our progression. I think Withering Aura is a very cool idea that helps keep us alive with a bit more defense and some sorcery point regeneration, but I think it might need a little bit more tweaking. It feels a bit underwhelming to me right now. Finally, at level 18, we get Superior Defiler. This gives us immunity to both the poison and exhausted conditions. This can be extremely powerful in certain campaigns and completely worthless in others, which makes it a bit harder to gauge. Exhaustion isn't particularly common generally speaking, but poison can be. So on average, this probably makes it pretty reasonable, but it's just coming a bit late. Level 18 for 2 condition immunities doesn't feel incredible. Fortunately, it also gives us another buff, which increases the radius of our Withering Aura to 30 feet, and additionally, enemies within that aura can't regenerate hit points while they are within it. There aren't a ton of creatures that have natural regeneration, so again, this is a bit more situational in nature. That said, the increase of Withering Aura to 30 feet is much more significant. It would have been nice to see an additional buff though, maybe making it so that the damage reduction could be twice our charisma modifier, or perhaps regaining 1d6 sorcery points. I think this is a reasonable capstone, but it's nothing mind-blowing. Overall, I think the flavor and the design of the Defiled Sorcery Sorcerer is incredible. It sounds like such a fun subclass to play. I do actually especially like that it pushes the class toward a more melee style or at least closer range kind of play. You need to be within 30 feet to activate Defile and Empower. Withering Aura is only 15 feet initially. Defiler's Ward also only works against melee attack rolls. All of these things push the class towards a much more up-close and personal playstyle, which is cool to see. In an effort to help support that, they also provided a number of touch spells, like Inflict Wounds, Bestow Curse, Vampiric Touch, and Contagion. And while most of these spells aren't great at a base level, getting what can almost amount to a free upcast on most of them does make them at least somewhat more attractive. This already looks like a very fun and different subclass to play, and I'm sure with a few small tweaks and buffs, it could be excellent. These are also the kinds of things that I just love to see happen in Unearthed Arcana, testing some concepts that might be a bit unorthodox or push the boundaries of 5e's typical design. This is the second time this year that we've seen a mechanic interact with hit dice. We saw it earlier with the Scion. I think this is a much cooler and more thematic representation of that concept, so I am hoping that it sticks. But they definitely need to refine the wording on the feature so it isn't so difficult to get through. Let me know your thoughts on the Defiled Sorcery Sorcerer, check out some of my other videos, but otherwise, take care.